Hello. I'm Billy. I'm here to talk about vibe coding and more generally just the state of AI for software engineering in 2025. I am recording the talk, so if you don't want to be in the camera, just make sure you cleared out the way. A little bit about me, just as an intro. So I'm Billy Rebecchi. I am a software engineering manager at Sanogenetics. I've recently started at Sano. Previously, I've got 5 years experience working at Student Beans. I've previously worked as a software engineer. I've now moved over to sort of the team leadership side. So I've got a lot of experience writing originally Android, but I've done quite a lot of Python backend stuff, a little bit of Next and TypeScript, and as a hobbyist, I really enjoy assembly programming. When I was fresh out of uni, I went straight into teaching. So I used to teach A-level computer science, and I continue to moderate for the OCR A-level coursework. So I try and keep my feet in sort of both sides. I really enjoy the industry side of the software engineering role, but also I'm a really big proponent for software engineering education in general, which is why I'm here today. And I recently moved to North Nottingham about 2 years ago with my wife and 2 kids. And I want to preface the talk by saying I am not an AI expert. This is just a talk to try and get some conversation going about what's happening in industry, the things that we're all seeing. Like, there's nothing here today that makes me an expert or any different to anyone else in this room. This is just the trends that I'm seeing to try and just generate a bit of conversation about like where we're going next, what we're going to see next. So I wanted to start with a definition for vibe coding, because this is something that maybe isn't agreed everywhere. So when I'm talking about vibe coding today, I'm specifically referring to using agentic AI, specialist models, to build software without any intervention from the user in terms of the code. So we're not looking at the code. We don't care what the code looks like. We don't care what it's built. When we're vibe coding in this sense, we're asking it to do whatever we want it to do, build this web page, build this block, make this database, and we trust it. And if something goes wrong, we ask it to change it. We don't go in the code and fix it, we just ask it to change it and try and fix it ourselves. This was coined by Andrej Karpathy, a very well-respected software engineer, and he coined this term in relation to something that he was doing when he was building weekend projects, and he calls it giving into the vibes, right? He talks about exponent potential here. So the fact that we can get the agent to build lots of big things for us and try out new ideas really, really quickly. And that's what I'm talking about today. So very quick overview for anyone who isn't familiar with how AI works. So underneath AI, and particularly the LLMs that we're talking about today, they're built on something called neural networks. There's lots of different ways of building AI, but the ones that we're talking about today are particularly neural networks. So we train an AI network by essentially we have a large number of nodes, and each node will have a value, similar to the way that our brain will work. So the way that the neurons in our brain fire is we create pathways, and when we learn something new, a new skill, it will create new pathways. The intention of neural networks is that we recreate that biostructure, but we do it through software. So we have lots of very tunable nodes, and we will essentially take a piece of test data. So this could be, for example, if we wanted to train an AI to recognize pictures of bears, we might have a picture of a panda, a picture of a polar bear, a picture of a brown bear, black bear, and we would label it as such. We would feed that data into many variations of a neural network, and then we'd get it to guess. So we'll show it a picture. It might look at each pixel location, and then it will try and work out, it will make a guess. Is that a bear? Is that a brown bear? Is that a black bear? Is that a panda? Okay. We take the output, we look at which of those agents was the most successful. We might have most of them with 5% accuracy. A couple of them might have 20 to 30% accuracy. There might be a couple that have 60, 70% accuracy. What we'll then do is we'll take the output, the ones that had that high dependability in the output, so those ones that had the 60 to 70% accuracy, and we'll reproduce them. So what we will do is we will make 100 copies of each of them, and then we might make small mutations to those dials, those neurons that we were talking about, and then the next time we feed all the data through, we'll again look at which ones were the most accurate, and we'll train it again and again and again, tens, hundreds, thousands, millions, billions of times. And at the end of it, you might end up with a model that's 99.7, 99.9, 99.99999% accurate for identifying pictures of bears. That's the one thing it can do. If you put in a picture of a butterfly and ask it to identify the butterfly, it's no idea what it's doing. It's a neural network that is trained to recognize pictures of bears. In the late 2010s, 2016, 2017, OpenAI and some of their peers developed new methodologies for speeding up this training process. So rather than us doing thousands of iterations a day, you might do billions of iterations a day, which meant that the speed with which AI was developing just accelerated at an unprecedented rate. And that's what's got us to where we are today. It's accelerated the development of AI in all its forms. You might hear ANI, AGI, and maybe even ASI. So ANI is an artificial narrow intelligence. An AGI is an artificial general intelligence, and an ASI is an artificial super intelligence. So the majority of what we're talking about today are LLMs. LLMs like ChatGPT, they are very, very good at answering pretty much any question you give it, okay? So you might think that they're a general intelligence, but actually they're trained to do that one specific thing. They're trained to navigate the biggest data set in the world, the internet, and essentially aggregate all that data so it can generate answers that, like, if you ask it something, it will give you an average of every piece of information on that specific topic that it can find, and it can navigate billions of pieces of information, which is why it's become so powerful. We think about it as being generally intelligent, but actually it is fairly narrow in what it can do. The one thing it does is it navigates very large data sets. That's what we've trained it to do. So, I spent not very long on this, and then I tried to improve it. And what I did is I went through lots of use cases for AI that I could think of and tried to find something that I couldn't fit into these three categories. And I've not found anything. So I'm hoping we can maybe find something today that we can't immediately find that fits into these categories. But in terms of, in my job, day to day, watching software engineers, product managers, QA engineers, content writers, you know, everyone I work with in my day to day, in my context, this is what I see AI being used for. Removing the tedium of copywriting in all its forms, okay? So where we have to write stuff out, type it out, write it out, it's replacing that. Acting as a data aggregator, okay? I will release a copy of these slides afterwards as well, so if you want to come back and look at anything. So acting as a data aggregator, essentially a smarter search engine, not necessarily a search engine though, because we might plug in our own document into it and ask it just to summarize one particular document, but essentially the ability to summarize or aggregate large amounts of data. And then finally, enabling people to leverage technologies that they couldn't otherwise leverage. That might be someone who's not a logo designer asking an agentic AI to build me a logo or give me some inspiration for a logo. It might be someone who doesn't know how to write code asking it to build them a piece of software using vibe coding, okay? But generally doing something that I wouldn't otherwise be able to do. And I just wanted to go through a couple of these use cases, more than a few actually. I wanted to just give some examples and see if we can maybe think about or put these into a box in terms of what use case we think they lay under. So Sally's a travel writer. She's got a 3,000 word article due tomorrow. She went on a recent trip. She's got lots of notes, but she needs to get it written up really quickly and she doesn't have time to do it. Against those three use cases, which would be removing the tedium of copywriting, summarizing large data sets, data aggregation, or enabling someone to do something they couldn't otherwise do, which box might we put this into?
1 and 2.
Who said that? 1 and 2? Yeah. Why would we, so in terms of the copywriting one?
It's got large nodes, so that first one seems to be an efficiency thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and the second one?
Efficiency. Aggregation of data is a clarity sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the third one, I'm pretty sure she's capable of doing it, so it doesn't. Although she could probably do it, it's efficiency and clarity, so speed.
Okay. Yeah, I think I've put specifically removing the tedium of copywriting. Well, this is kind of why I wanted to do this talk, because yeah, I think you're right. There is that second one as well. It's aggregating the notes that she's provided to it and then helping flesh that out into an article. So multiple use cases going into that one.
The reason is I do that all the time.
There we go. James has been looking for a good apple crumble recipe. He doesn't want to use any granulated sugar. He wants to find a natural substitute that he can use, but he's struggling to find a recipe that gives him like a definitive answer on what he can use instead of sugar. If he was to use AI to help him here, like which one might we think this is out of the three? The second one, data aggregation. So yeah, we might ask AI, can you give me like a load of, like summarize a load of articles, what sort of stuff do people recommend? And yeah, I've gone with acting as a data aggregator. Levi needs a suit for a wedding and an upcoming funeral. He puts together samples of suits he likes and he asks ChatGPT to generate an image of him wearing a suit inspired by his mood board. What would we put this under? Put it under 3, something he couldn't otherwise do. Yeah? Anything else we might say this is? 2? Some data aggregation, like taking multiple suits in. Thomas needs to integrate his software application with the Google Maps API. By the way, the last one and this one are both real examples. He takes a copy of the Google Maps technical documentation and embeds it into his Cursor agent to help him implement his changes. And specifically what this might do is Cursor might be able to read that documentation and automatically generate method stubs for him to access the API. What would we put this under? 3? Yeah? And maybe data aggregation as well? I think there is definitely an argument for 3. I didn't put it down in the end. I put data aggregator because it's navigating a data source that you've provided it to help summarize it for you. But also, yeah, maybe he doesn't have the capability to actually do this in isolation. Again, it's that efficiency thing, right? Has he got the time to go and read the docs? Has he got the capability to go and read the docs? If the answer to either of those questions is no, then this is the kind of use case. Alia is putting together a business model for her vegetable-in-a-box startup to take investors. She uses AI to help her put together a deck and projections on future profitability. What would we put this one under? 1 and 2. So copywriting, data aggregation. Maybe number 3 as well. Maybe she doesn't know how to do this thing already. I don't actually know what I put down for this. I put copywriting and the leveraging technologies they couldn't otherwise access. But yeah, I think data aggregation as well, right? And this is something I'm going to touch on a little bit more in a minute. But Alia knows vegetables and she knows how to put them in a box, right? That's her bread and butter. She doesn't know business. If she gets into business, is she going to be able to rely on AI to do this for her forever? You shake your head, but maybe. I don't actually know, right? Maybe. But is her going through this the first time going to teach her enough about it that she wouldn't need to use AI again? Or at least that she could do it on her own? I don't know. So it's funny when we talk about the capability thing, because by using an agent, we might actually develop new skills that we didn't have before. And I'll touch on that a bit more in a minute. Okay, I've got 2 more. Harry works as a freelance product designer and has been hired by a local startup to produce some UX UI designs. He wants to go above and beyond and give a demo of how users would navigate the flows. What might we put this one under?
3.
Yeah. So this was my specific linkage to vibe code, and this is the sort of thing I would see someone using vibe coding for. As an example, you know, it's not necessarily he's building a product, but he wants to show them. He wants them to be able to touch and feel it. Lastly, Emmy works as a software engineer and needs to build a new page for the sign-up flow with additional inputs. The flow uses mostly existing designs, but they're very verbose, and they use a lot of boilerplate. Essentially, like, they're not reusable, which means it's quite tedious to go over and replace them. And she needs to modify these templates to enable the new flow. What might we put this under? 1, 3, 2. So I've put this under number 1. because even though I've put copywriting here, and this is interesting maybe for anyone who's a software engineer in the room, like the way I'm seeing software engineers use AI generally tends to be like more from a copywriting perspective and like just removing verbosity the same way that we might use method stubs in VS Code previously. We're maybe now relying on AI to do that a bit more. Cool. So, to summarize that little section, I see engineers getting value from AI by leveraging it to do repetitive tasks that they take a lot of time. They know how to do them, or they reasonably can learn how to do them, but they take a lot of time and it speeds up that flow. That's the way I'm seeing AI being used by engineers successfully. Not the only way, but the main way. I'm seeing designers and founders, by extension, getting value from AI by using vibe coding to showcase ideas without needing expensive engineering resource. And if you're looking for investment, or if you're looking just to test out and experiment with something new, this is where I'm seeing the real value of vibe coding coming from, okay? But, a word of warning, code written by AI, in my opinion, is not production ready. Without being reviewed by engineers or being built by engineers, it's not production ready. It's my opinion. Go do it. Go put it out in the wild, right? And you might be fine, or you might have issues. So to try and give an example, like a real world example of how I see vibe coding fitting into the current workflows that we maintain. I've got an idea, which is tomato, right? I grow tomatoes at home and I have an issue, which is that they're really heavy, and when they grow on the ground, the tomatoes stay in the soil and they rot. So I need to keep them upright. So I've got this innovative idea for keeping tomatoes upright, and it's going to have built-in support so I can hang the tomatoes from the vines. Now I'm not an engineer, right? So I'm going to use vibe coding, the real world vibe coding, right? To build this thing for me. So I plug it in and I say, build me a planter for tomatoes which has upright supports for vines. And I pass it into ChatGPT, and ChatGPT builds me this beautiful planter here, which is my actual tomato planter that I made. And at first glance, it does what it needs to do. We can see my tomato plants are being held upright. It's perfect. It does exactly what it needs to do. When we move in a bit closer though, we see that the central hanging part is just twine, and it works, but it's maybe not the best thing to have used for this use case. And then when we zoom in a little bit further, we see it's made out of terrible quality pallet wood. There's nails sticking out of it. There's knots in the wood that has been knocked out, and it's probably not structurally sound. And I'm probably going to get in trouble with my wife when my kid inevitably makes his face bleed when he bangs into the edge of it, right? So to convey the concept of a tomato planter and why it's needed, like this works really well. It solves the problem. You know, it doesn't do it in a perfect way, but I just needed something that let my tomatoes stand up. It's great, right? So it conveys the idea. It's a prototype. I'm going to use it as a production ready thing, but in a couple of weeks, my tomatoes are probably going to snap that twine. I'm going to come out in the morning and they're all going to be all over the floor. That's a risk that I'm taking on as an individual, and I'm fine with that risk because this is a prototype. But if I was going to take this to market, I'd need to use proper quality materials. I'd need to use proper engineering principles to develop it. I need to be able to give people some information about the structural integrity of it, the load capabilities of it, how many tomatoes, how many users can it take? You know, what's the weight capabilities of it? What's the maintenance? What's the lifespan? How long am I expecting it to last? If I was going to take this to market, those are the things I need to be able to communicate. Vibe coding doesn't necessarily give us software that can do that. And just as a bonus, I mentioned use cases for AI. I got AI to build this logo for me because it's quick, right? And I didn't want to spend a few hours in GIMP designing a logo for a quick talk. So like AI is really valuable. I get some use out of it for this kind of thing. Like it's fantastic when you use it in the right context for efficiency.
Which is your favorite?
The one that I used, which is this one here, because it's the only one that actually listened to the prompt about the O being a tomato, but it still didn't get the color of these right. So I asked it, make me a logo for a company called Tomato, which sells tomato planters with built-in supports for hanging tomato vines. The letter O in the logo should resemble a tomato, and the letters UP should be a different colour to the rest of the logo. It completely ignored me and did its own thing. Some cool results, but it just did its own thing. And again, if that's the quality of your code you're getting out, it might resemble what you've asked it for.
If you said must rather than should, you see.
Yes, yeah. You can tell I don't use AI enough. So, those who are using AI for building production code are running into issues. And if you haven't seen this, there's quite a few threads that I've seen around this, but this is sort of the big one that you see 370,000 odd views on this from weeks ago. Someone built a SaaS product using Cursor, entirely using vibe coding, and released it and documented it on Twitter, and some bad actors used common principles that they could see in Cursor written code to break into his API, hack his database keys. He even put his AWS keys in a tweet. So he exposed his own keys. And this was his follow-up tweet. And this touches on what I was saying before about if we use an AI to do something we didn't previously know how to do, maybe there's some learning there that's going on. Like, this is a pretty expensive lesson. If you put vibe-coded products live, you risk this. You might not have this. You might have success, but there's going to be technical debt there. There's going to be other issues around it. Also, we don't know what kind of exploits might be developed in 10 years. So if you use Cursor to develop your database, right now it might be sound, but in 10 years, bad actors might realize that the majority of Cursor databases written on this version had this problem, and then they use it to exploit your database. Like, you never know what's going to come in there. You also don't know that with production code, to be fair, but at least when you've got engineers that have built it, you've documented and you understand what it is, how it works, and when that exploit gets put live, you might be in a better place to resolve it. Maybe. Maybe you just get hit either way, right? Your mileage may vary. So what should I be using AI for? I've split this out into engineers and sort of other. This is pretty engineering heavy because I am an engineer. You should be training AI to adhere to your standards, whatever that means for you. So I work in larger organizations. I've come from a much larger organization to a bit of a smaller organization, but something that I've seen commonly in software engineering teams is that you have some sort of standards. We've agreed that we're going to write code with this pattern. Do you have trailing parentheses, or do you put them new line or same line? Like, lots of small things that people care about. You can write, similar to the way that you would write a lint rule for your pipelines, you can write those kind of rules to go into your AI. Just as was Nick, wasn't it? Yeah. Just as Nick said, right? It didn't make my tomato a tomato because I said it should rather than it must, right? Like, if you enforce these rules, they should be enforced, and that's what things are being designed for. V0 is a fantastic example of this because with Shad UI, you can define your own components and then get the AI to build all of your pages using only your own components. So it's basically just building a framework for your web page, and then you plug your stuff in afterwards. You plug your data sets in afterwards. So from an engineering perspective, like, there is ways to utilize AI that can allow you to do these things. And one of my friends called me out on this because originally I put AI can do things, AI should be doing jobs that juniors historically did. And he disagreed with me, and he made a really good point, which is that the bottom has been falling out of junior engineering since before AI came to popularity. And the reason for that is that you can pay a junior engineer 30 grand to make mistakes and take 6 to 12 months to come to value proposition and sap energy from your senior engineers. Or you can pay 20 grand more and get a decently competent mid-level, or slightly more than that, and get a very capable senior. And that value proposition, when you look at it, is kind of an exponential scale. A senior drives much, much more value per pound versus a junior. So I don't think the junior problem is a new problem. I'll talk more about that in a minute in terms of advice for if you're a junior engineer trying to get into this. Specifically here, I've put AI can do things that seniors can't, but also struggles with some things that juniors can, okay? The sorts of things that seniors they could learn to do, but like no senior is going to want to go into a really boilerplate, verbose, heavy code base and make design changes and update all of the margins from 1 pixel to 0.5 pixels, right? A senior engineer is not going to go in and do that work. That's something that our senior engineers won't do. And that's what AI is really powerful for, those grand sweeping tasks of like, let's build this page, let's make this thing. And some like issues with AI, so as an example, if you said to an AI, like I want a user to be able to log in, for example, this user might have a username of XYZ and I want them to be able to log into the system with a password such as this. Your AI might hard code those values into the page so that the only user that can log in is that specific user with that string and that password, right? We never know quite what we're going to get out. And if, again, this comes back to the vibe coding thing, if we aren't au fait with coding and understand how the software is being written, we risk exposing ourselves to these kind of problems where the AI builds something that is fundamentally insecure. And a junior going to understand that problem, no issue. Okay, so there's levels here. There's things that AI are really good for, there's things that they aren't good for, and they don't necessarily map directly to existing levels in the way that we think about what progression in a company or in a role would look like. And just to appease everyone else who's not an engineer, are you a designer or are you a founder? Yes, you should be using AI to quickly iterate, throw together demos, do idea generation, speed up tasks for efficiency, get as much done as you can with the time that you have. Vibe coding should be a replacement for functionality such as I used to use Adobe XD quite a lot when I worked in studios because I could throw together in 10 minutes a couple of mobile screens and then I could set up basically buttons that when you clicked it, it'd move from one storyboard to the next. It would pretend to be an app. When you took that kind of interactive demo somewhere, especially when they'd sent you maybe a requirements document a week before and you'd come up with this whole thing, they'd be like, well, you've built it all already. Let's just go live with this. And I'm like, whoa, there's no database. You can't actually type anything in. But yeah, it gives that resemblance of functionality. That's really important when you're similar to the tomato planters, right? You want to see and understand and be able to touch and feel and play with and break the thing so that you can understand how it works. That's what vibe coding is incredibly valuable for. Use your demo for attracting interest, getting feedback, learning from your customers, learning from your users, making iterative changes, getting some investment, do all those things, and then get an engineering team or reach out to a studio to build things properly. Be wary of using it for production code for all the reasons we've previously discussed. Like you run risks if you do that, and you just have to accept that those risks exist. Maybe you accept them, maybe you don't, but like you can't go into it blind. So saw this tweet which I thought was fascinating around how Shopify's design team now using AI to essentially do exactly what we're talking about here. It's massively sped up their product design workflows and they're able to iterate much faster and they're able to produce designs and examples, prototypes that people can touch and feel and mess around with and see the functionality and question and give feedback on. Just an example of a big company doing exactly the kind of thing that we're talking about today and using AI in these healthy ways to get more done to improve productivity. Is AI coming for my job? No, maybe, probably not yet. And I'm going to touch back on the junior stuff and then I'm going to touch more generally. So from a junior perspective, I used to work as a teacher. One of my old year 9 students is now in his second year of uni and he reached out to me because he wanted some advice on getting an internship. He was fantastically promising coder. I'm not going to call him a software engineer, but coder when he was in year 9. Coming in and just generally wanting to build stuff all the time, really excited with playing with code. Gets to uni, finds coursework quite difficult. Everyone else is using AI, I'm going to use AI too. And the problem is he has talked to me a lot about how he feels like he's kind of scuppered himself because the 2 years that he spent on his degree already that he should have been using to really learn and really make mistakes and develop his skills, he hasn't necessarily used for that. And now he's talking about taking a year out to go and develop those skills manually that he could have been getting all that time. So don't rely on AI, especially if you're a junior, to solve things that you don't know how to do. You should never really be using AI to solve things you don't know how to do within your realm. Okay, and we've talked about using AI to do things that you couldn't otherwise do. We should be talking about things that are probably domain adjacent there, like things that you reasonably don't have enough knowledge about to even approach. But if it's just like, here's a new API and I don't know how to use the API yet, technically you don't know enough to implement the API, but how long is it going to take you as a senior engineer to read through those docs and learn how to implement an API? Don't just rely on it for everything. And there's a really great show that I watch, which is called Delicious in Dungeon, which is a Japanese show that's kind of loosely based on D&D. This is like the most off-topic example ever. But in it, they've got this dwarf guy, and he's lighting a fire manually, and the wizard elf comes over, and she's like, let me just light the fire with magic. And he's like, no. If we always do things the easy way, and we forget how to do them the hard way, and when we don't know how to do them the hard way, when we don't have access to the easy way anymore, we've forgotten how to do it. So practicing those skills is still really important, whether it be weekend projects, whether it just be a particular piece of work that you decide you're going to do manually, just so you don't forget how to do it, and don't forget the pain points. Don't forget to appreciate how much of an improvement it is being able to use AI for this. That's the one side of the junior thing, which is just be wary that you don't end up in a position where you don't have these skills, because when all juniors don't have those skills today, there's going to be a drought of people with those skills. And if you get those skills now, that gives you job security for probably the next 20 to 30 years. The majority of incidents I solve at work are not simple things. It's when we've got problems with connections between multiple servers and services. Even if AI, which I don't think it can right now, but even if AI could plug into all of those services, which I think we're probably 5 to 10 years away from it being able to do all of that automatically, even when it can do it, can you imagine me reaching out to my legal team and being like, can I give this AI agent access to everything and give it the ability to change everything and anything it wants all at once? Like, we're years and years and years out from that reality where we rely on it that heavily. So the best way you can, as an engineer, get job security today is by ensuring you know and understand how to solve these complex top-level problems. And if you do that, it's going to give you a little bit more long-term job security. But also, if you're a junior, make sure you do know how to use AI, because that's kind of going to be expected. So it's about getting that balance right. If you're not in engineering, don't know, maybe, maybe not, right? Has the role of a copywriter disappeared, or has it evolved? You know, should we even be writing copy anymore, considering we've probably got one person who's written like some really brief notes that they've asked an AI to generate into a 2,000-word article, which the person on the other side takes the 2,000-word article and then asks their AI agent to summarize it in 20 bullet points. Like, you know, who knows? That's not the point of the talk, but yeah. I just wanted to give special thanks to Lewis Danks. He's my best mate. He lives in Newcastle, but I chat to him a lot about this. We talk a lot about AI and just general use. And the Levi example, the guy with the suit, the funeral and the wedding, that's him right now. And this was the picture that we used to put into the AI, which is him on his lovely little holiday. He found a picture of a suit that he really liked. And there you go. That's him wearing the suit. We got the tie from another little flower image. I think it's amazing that it can take that and generate that. Like, that's insane. And then he went out and bought it, and he looks dapper as anything. So thanks, Lou, and well done on buying your suit. Questions or thoughts or ideas?
You used the words assembly language and fun in the same sentence. How?
I will chew the fat with you all day about that, but so this is something that I used to talk a lot about when I did like talks and teaching in the education sphere. I used to teach what's called LMC. I don't know if you're familiar with Peter Higginson, but he's quite a renowned education researcher around UK universities who was in computer science. And he has the Little Man computer, and it's essentially just a little assembly computer that you can access via RAM. And I was finding my year 12 students via a web page. I was finding my year 12 students were really struggling with the concept of assembly programming. But if I took year 9 students who'd never done any programming before, they found it easier than the year 12 students. Because I think high-level programming fundamentally teaches us that computers think like us, and they don't. So if you remove the abstraction, you go to that lower level where you are doing things at the logic level, essentially. I just find that really fascinating. The problem is, high-level languages are so prevalent that you'd never do this in a job anymore unless you're a top 0.01% and you're working at like AMD or Intel and you're implementing new assembly languages. But fundamentally, like as a teaching resource, I see assembly languages like one of the, like just foundational. And I really enjoy doing it because you're essentially, and we spoke a little bit about this before the talk started, but like you're just moving electrons around, like that level of power where you're actually moving electrons within a piece of silicon is incredible, and you don't get that with high-level programming languages. So.
You mentioned V0 earlier. Whereabouts does that kind of fit in, or like what kind of tool is it?
So, are you familiar with Next? Next.js. So Next.js, are you familiar with?
I know what it is, but I don't know. I've never used it.
So the company behind Next, I don't know the exact. I think it's the same founders. They have a server platform called Vercel, and V0 is built by the same team, and it's an AI agent that is specifically designed to tie in with Next and reactive components. So it's just kind of an evolution of AI agents where it's even narrower in the sense that it's not a general coding agent, it's very specific to that purpose. And it means that it's just been built in a way which makes it really suitable for building components and pages in a reactive style.
So does that kind of handle the testing side? Because I guess for me, like almost the implicit hint of all this stuff is kind of, yes, the AI is really helpful, it can generate stuff, but you need the software 1.0 stuff, which is testing, etc., to validate. So it's almost like the way that it feels like people are hinting at what you should use it is essentially kind of test-driven development. You have a spec of these are the things that it should do, and then that's great, right? Because AI can always test against that. If it fails, it doesn't do it right. That sort of seems to make sense as an approach, but I don't know. I don't really hear it talked about in quite that specific sense very often. So I don't know if you think that is how you would kind of go about using it.
I think it's a really interesting point because there's a point where you have to pass control over to the agent, and when we're talking about TDD, a lot of engineers are also using the agent to write those tests. So, as we saw in my prompt earlier, I said should instead of must. And even if I say must, I don't know it's necessarily going to listen to me. And I think this is where the code review process and human written tests are also still valuable. Maybe not all human written tests, but when we're thinking about writing a piece of software, you have to start with the specification. The principles of TDD are around the idea that we're solving the entire problem before we write the code to solve the problem. And if you're doing prompt engineering, those are the kind of same principles, even if we're not explicitly writing those tests first. I don't know if that answers your question, but the answer is I don't really have an answer, right? Because we're all kind of discovering this thing as we go. And also I don't write software day to day, so I don't use AI for writing any software because I enjoy writing assembly instead in my downtime.
Just talking about it personally, because I want to dive into some of this stuff I haven't had time to yet, so I'm kind of still in the traditional software way of writing things at the moment. So it's kind of interesting to hear from people that have actually kind of used it.
Yeah, I think fundamentally, holding off isn't necessarily a bad thing from a perspective of we're going through an extreme shift of SDLC. So we're massively changing how we approach software development because of this. And naturally, things are changing week by week by week by week anyway. And every single time that a new model or there's a new progress is made, the way people are using it changes and grows anyway. I don't necessarily think you're being left behind if you don't pick it up straight away. I don't know that. But I think that when so many people are using it, it's important that anyone sits down with an agent just to see the power of it. And honestly, I come from that same position. I don't use an agent for writing any of my code. Everything that informs my talk today is me just sitting down essentially with V0 and asking it to build me big web pages and going, wow, maybe I should be using this. And I think that's it. It's about that informed approach, and you struggle to appreciate quite how powerful and quite how good quality the software it writes can be until you've dived into it.
I got one question. Has there been any incident recently where you've been surprised and impressed as to what AI can do?
This yesterday, like I kind of knew it was possible in my head, but I'd not thought to use it this way. And this is actually something else me and Lou talked about that I've not included in the talk, but I think is generally more interesting, is like, we're talking about AI from a productivity perspective all the time. Yeah. What can it do for me at work? What can it do here? What can it do there? And maybe we're not thinking about like the new stuff that it can be doing for us, things that you otherwise wouldn't be able to do, or things that would be impossible. And when it comes down to those like AI use cases that I talked about at the beginning, how can you use those three things for yourself? So like, yeah, this really surprised me when he showed it. And then I went, of course. And like, hey, Primark or ASOS, when you see this talk, you know, a couple of years ago, I worked on an AR application for a furniture company where you used your phone and you could plop a couch down in your living room, and like, are people already doing this? Are there shops that are doing this? Like, this is, you know, the sort of thing. And I think just anything really that, yeah, what new ways of working have we not invented in our personal lives? Like the recipe one's a big one for me, because I don't use recipes. I've never used recipes. I will like look at an ingredients list and use it for inspiration. So AI for me, like rather than saying, give me a recipe for something, saying, what could I use as an alternative in this recipe? And it gives me a suggestion or a couple of suggestions, and then it allows me to think, oh, right, cool, I hadn't thought about using molasses or honey or whatever it is. Like, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
I'm just going to come over to Will first.
My question
Sorry, Adam.
is, in your opinion, what is the future of software engineering?
What's the timescale?
That's your question. My follow-up question is, what is your vision for software engineering in the next 3 years?
I think we see use of AI begin to mature, even if AI itself and the application it's building doesn't necessarily mature. I think we're going to see a lot more companies validating and initiating AI use within people's day-to-day and sort of encouraging it. This is something we've been talking about a lot in my current workplace, in terms of people are going to be reluctant to use AI in their day-to-day until you give them the go-ahead to do that. And that means being a front-thinking AI leader, but also, as we've just talked about, these use cases are so varied and imaginative that if you set a specific AI use case policy, you might be then preventing people from using it in new and creative ways which improve productivity. So I think that over the next 3 years, we're just going to see that come to fruition, where people are using it to be more productive. And I think there's just going to be a general maturing of the way we approach thinking about AI in our day-to-day.
Yeah, I can see where this is headed. Nick, the background is law. Mm-hmm. I studied law as well. Every day people are going into contracts, verbal contracts. Things work, but it's only when they don't work that there's people like Nick and I can go in and read and find out where the gaps are, where it breaks down. Mm-hmm. And that's where we exploit things. We identify, we exploit the gaps in the contracts, we take it to court, either defense or attack. I can see where you're coming from as well with your assembly. Detail-orientated, problem-solving, focused. Mm-hmm. I can see where the AI is going to definitely help. It's going to speed up. More and more people are going to create things. But it's going to create specialist departments, just like they are lawyers, specialist programmers who can go in and find out why it doesn't work, where it breaks down, to exploit that.
Yeah.
So it's going to explode. But there's going to be these micro teams that go in problem solving, and there's going to be people like yourself who can read the code at a low level that will be going in fixing problems. Mm-hmm.
And I think that you're already seeing a bit of a shift in the way that hiring is happening around software engineering teams at the minute. The trend I'm seeing is a move from I am a Ruby engineer, I write Ruby code, or I am a Python engineer, I write Python code, to people being product engineers, people that think about end users, who might be a specialist in a particular language, but what AI is proving, and particularly like AI that's able to write in multiple languages is proving, is that if you have strong, back to the fundamentals, but if you have those strong fundamentals and you understand the principles, you can not even bother learning Ruby syntax and just go in and still solve Ruby kind of problems. And those are the kind of problems that we've seen top engineers doing forever anyway. Like the best engineers I've ever worked with, doesn't matter what domain the problem is in, doesn't matter what piece of software or technology it's in, like if they don't know how to do it right now, you know, I'll go to bed and wake up the next morning and they've done an all-nighter and you know, they've written a thesis on it and they've learned everything they need to know to now go in and solve that problem. And I think AI is just enabling people to speed that transition up. So yeah, I think you're completely right in the sense that this is just going to create an evolution of how we think about software engineering.
Well, I've just done it right now because you mentioned assembly. Totally off my mind. 5 minutes on there, got myself back up to speed with low-level languages and high-level programming while you were talking. So I've already got a summary there.
There you go. Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? Yeah, because before you'd have had to have navigated loads of Google pages, read someone's articles, etc. But the AI can aggregate that data for you. Any other questions or thoughts?
I just thought I'd say I'm like a technically minded, but I'm not a dev at all. And I work in sort of like the agile framework and stuff like that, but I'm a little bit of a rebel in the sense that I'm just like, let's just get it built and see what happens. And like you, I've done wireframes and stuff like that where you can click and play and people think it's amazing. So if I do it for me from a business analyst point of view, it will fundamentally change probably the way that we operate in discovery as well, because we spend so much time like analysing, looking at process, looking at all this stuff that's built, whereas IP actually gives us the opportunity to go, let's build a concept, let's just put it in there and go for it and show people that it's then viable to then, as you say, passive development teams. I mean, this talk is so refreshing from yourself, because a lot of people come in with AI, they're like, oh my God, it's going to solve all of our life's problems, you're going to lose your jobs. Essentially, that's what they're saying, whereas you're getting this balance where it's just like, AI is fundamental and it's got some great advantages. It's not perfect, so you still need that underlying fundamentals. And again, with a lot of the startup people and stuff like that, there's a lot of pressure to just put AI in as standard. Like every app now, AI is standard, but actually you've got to think, well, do we need it? Is it beneficial? Is it getting the right thing? That sort of stuff. So it's really, really interesting what you've delivered today. And again, from my point of view, I'm going to be vibe coding now. So my other question off the back of that is like, what's the best resources and stuff to start looking at this, like in that sort of point of view?
I don't know. This is my honest answer. So I don't vibe code. My only experience of AI thus far has been playing with V0 to see how I can use it in that context. And as I said at the beginning of this talk, like I'm not purporting to be an expert here. This is just, you know, one man's thoughts on the topic, and I think anyone would have had their own thoughts today as well, right? So go ask ChatGPT where to start.
I mean, the other aspect as well, so I work for a sustainability company, so it's just understanding the sustainability aspect of AI and the impact it's having environmentally and stuff like that.
Just don't say thank you, because apparently that costs loads of compute power.
I mean, when you look at everyone made little plastic models of themselves on LinkedIn quite recently, and you think, well, actually the value of that versus the environmental impact actually was quite severe in that sense. So again, it's just saying, just because we're going through this in the company now, just because you can doesn't mean you should as well. So that's something else.
Yeah, I think that's where the policy side of things come in as well, in terms of leadership. Leadership in any company has to drive direction, and I think that a lot of companies have stayed relatively silent on this for quite a while, and it's allowed use of AI to maybe develop in very healthy ways, but also some unhealthy ways, and now you're seeing companies having to undo some of that work. So if your policy is let's not use it, like cool, that's a good policy, but just know that people are still probably using it.
So what was your point about thank you?
So every time you send a message to an AI agent, there's processing that happens server side that will need to return a result. And apparently there was like tens of millions of kilowatt hours of electricity used last year with people saying thank you to ChatGPT, which I will say I have done as well, because I'm like, please remember I said thank you when our AI overlords take over in like 60 years.